Welcome back here today on the beautiful campus of Florida Panhandle Technical College. Spring has sprung. I don't think we had a winter this year. The best part of living in Northwest Florida, certainly the southeast part of the United States, is that although we do have seasons, we don't get any of the extensively hot or cold weather. Although with no winter and this spring lasting 6 months, we just may have that hot summer this year. We're here today with Caitlyn Cerame from the West Florida Regional Planning Council. When we come back, we're going to talk about CRA, Community Redevelopment Agency. Certainly you've heard the term CRA. We here in Washington County, in Chipley, in the city of Chipley, have a CRA that affects the downtown area. When we come back, we're going to talk to Caitlyn about what her agency, and she as a planner, is going to do as far as trying to coordinate the various agencies, the city, the county, the existing CRA, to see what we can do to make things happen. They don't have a dog in the fight. The West Florida Regional Planning Council, simply that third party bringing to bear suggestions, perhaps being a referee sometimes when it's necessary. In any case, we're going to let Caitlyn tell all this in her words when we come back, and we will be right back. Welcome back. As mentioned, our guest today is Caitlyn Cerame from West Florida Regional Planning Council. I mistakenly first said Northwest Florida. What region, before we get into all the nuts and bolts, do you actually cover as West Florida Regional Planning Council?
Sure. So we have 7 counties from Escambia County to Holmes, then down to Bay County. So a good portion of the Panhandle is our territory, and what we do is provide technical assistance, grant writing assistance to cities and counties, local municipalities if they need them. So it's membership based. We are semi-governmental, and we are here to serve the local municipalities.
Yeah, interesting area that you cover. Mm-hmm. Bay County with obviously the beaches and the large tourism area. Yes. Walton County, now certainly South Walton, very much tourism related. Escambia, same thing as you get a little bit farther west, less so, but certainly South Walton and Panama City Beaches area. Mm-hmm. I referred to the CRA in Panama City Beach. Were you on board when that happened?
No. We are not involved in that CRA. We basically, if someone reaches out to us, we will come and assist, as they need. So it just depends. But I mean, there's definitely differences and different needs depending on where you are in the region to compare to urbanized areas as opposed to rural areas. So.
Yeah, and it's like the tourist development tax. The coastal areas, they're talking about sand replenishment and that sort of thing, mm-hmm. beach renourishment, whereas obviously we don't have those problems. Although, interestingly, our workforce is very much tied into those tourism industry and the service industry and so forth.
Yes.
All right, all that aside, let's start with nuts and bolts. Who is Caitlyn Cerame, and what is West Florida Regional Planning Council?
So I'm a planner for the West Florida Regional Planning Council. I do a little bit of economic development. We are actually in an economic development district here in the Panhandle area, so we can receive federal funding if we apply for it for certain types of economic development projects. And then also do a lot of land use planning as well, so assisting cities and counties with their land development code, comprehensive plans. But the council does a plethora of things. I mean, we help with housing, we staff the transportation planning organizations in the 3 urbanized areas. We help with environmental programs through the Bay Area Resource Council. So we just do everything. I could go on and on, but specifically here, we are working with the City of Chipley and the Community Redevelopment Agency on a grant-funded project right now to update their redevelopment plan.
Up till relatively recently, Mike Durantz was the county planner for the County of Washington, in which we find ourselves today. Mm-hmm. He moved on. That is the time at which you guys came in. Mm-hmm. Do you provide the services which ordinarily, for instance, that planner position would do?
Yes.
Okay.
Washington County contracts with us to provide the position and fulfill that position of a planner for the county. So, we already kind of have a little bit of an understanding of what's going on in the county, what the needs are, what's changing, what the community is looking forward to in the future. So. Mike
was a friend of mine, great guy, and as much as I miss him, I can't help but understand the value of having an organization, and you may be that person, but you've got a huge number of people behind you. You've got a history, you've got an understanding of the entire Panhandle, in your case, West Florida. So I can see where the value would be in that case. Also, just as any contracted position, without that employee status, you don't have insurance and benefits and all that to worry about necessarily as well. Let's talk about downtown Chipley, Florida. Chipley is a very old town, not unlike hundreds of towns in Florida that are in that same situation.
Right.
I don't know if I've ever actually heard the term blight used in conjunction with downtown Chipley, but certainly verging on areas that definitely need immediate attention, others that if they don't have attention probably within the next 10 years are going to have severe problems. And then obviously we want to look past that. We don't want to be in emergency mode all the time.
Right.
Would it be fair to say that your first effort will be to sort of get out of that, or help us to get out of that emergency mode, so then we can actually move forward and actually have planning for that future?
Yeah, I would say that the intent is to have a roadmap for the future. That's the intent of the redevelopment plan. So the plan is required by state statute for a CRA. And it's supposed to state certain things like what their goals are, what their objectives are, and how are you going to implement some of these things that you want to do. It has to have something like housing elements, so you have to address that. And the CRA's plan hadn't been updated in quite some time, so if we're going to be on the ball and be proactive about things, they understood that it was time to get this going, because they are very focused on working to improve downtown Chipley.
Many people, I'm sure many of our viewers today, don't know what a CRA is. Community Redevelopment Agency. Talk a little bit about what kind of legislation is necessary to make that happen, and where those monies come from, who actually contributes, and where those monies can be spent.
Sure. So it's in state statute that you can form a special district, so that's what a CRA is, and what it does is it sets aside increases in property values to somewhat of a trust fund, and any increase in property value can then be used towards redevelopment specifically in that area. So it's used as a planning tool and an economic development tool in cities all across Florida. Like you said, it's Panama City. I mean, they have it in Church Street in downtown Orlando. They do it in Ybor City, in Tampa. They do it a lot in conjunction with Main Street programs all over a lot of these smaller downtown historic towns. They do it. So it can be a great tool to use. It's just another tool in your toolbox to help try to, revitalize and bring economic development to downtowns.
Much like the tourist development bed tax, many people are up in arms when they hear about funds being spent, and because they don't know where they came from.
Yeah.
In reality, as far as CRA is concerned, if you don't own property in the downtown area, then you don't, or in that CRA, you don't participate, and consequently you can't take advantage of those monies either. We've seen a lot of really good projects in downtown Chipley using those CRA grants and loans, both of which are extremely attractive. Grants, obviously, but even the loans are very favorable terms. The old Vance Theater, for instance, and that's, I only say that because it's very high profile,
Right.
took advantage of roofing, facade, all kinds of improvements. What's your challenge coming into a brand new area like this? And you guys have been here a couple of years now, I guess. What is your challenge going into any new area? I know obviously you're the new guy, and all of a sudden, people are concerned about, what are they coming in here telling us to do this for? But in reality, as you point out, you don't tell anybody to do anything. You're simply there to advise and to act as that third party.
Yeah.
But what is that challenge going in, and how do you deal with that?
Probably the biggest challenge is understanding the needs and the unique nature of, Chipley. It's, like you said, there are a lot of small towns in the Panhandle area, but everyone has its own history, its own wants and needs, and so that's sort of the intent behind this project. A majority of it is capturing community input. So like you said, we're not necessarily providing all of these recommendations. We initially formed a steering committee. So that was made up, of the people of Chipley. It's the business owners, building owners, residents that live within the CRA. And so we got them together, and we had 4 steering committee meetings. And really, we just facilitated the opportunity for them to all get together and talk about what they are seeing every day as a building owner, as a business owner, what are their needs. We worked diligently with them, and I give them a lot of credit. They stayed late, did this after hours, after their job, and they identified goals, objectives, and strategies that they thought were most important to help improve Chipley, or really make it what they thought it needed. And so they also had a vision, and so they had a vision that was very balanced. They wanted to protect and promote the historic charm of downtown Chipley, but they also wanted it to be a place where people could come and shop. They have entertainment opportunities, and also a place where there are job opportunities as well. So they want people to come here, have families, and stay here generation after generation.
Yeah, and that opens up a lot of doors. Most notably, and you sort of gave me a good segue into what I want to talk about next, and that is that historical element. We were contracted by the county to document the condemnation of the old courthouse, the demolition and then construction of the new, and that project is almost done. A very large component of that was that historical society and those people that were very interested in making sure the columns on the front were preserved. Some of the old architecture was brought back into the new project. So these people are extremely passionate. What are you hearing from them? Are they being realistic? Because in a perfect world, everybody would join hands and sing Kumbaya and it would all work out great. But unfortunately, we know that sometimes people have pet peeves. Are you finding that they are being realistic when it comes to, for instance, the Mongovan building? Has that come into any of the conversation yet? Obviously, that's an issue, certainly.
We haven't talked specifically about specific buildings. Things that the steering committee have brought up are safety. So not even just being inside the building, but outside the building, because they do want it to be safe for pedestrians. So sidewalks was a huge issue. Being able to get downtown and crosswalks safely into these buildings. And there was an acknowledgement that we need to look at these buildings and figure out what's the structural integrity of them, what's important. I think they were very realistic and have a good balance between preserving the historic character of the area, but yet we want to be open to revitalizing this area so that you can have all different types of businesses be within these historic buildings, so if it's retrofitting, whatever needs to happen, that we make that work.
Many other small southern towns in this general area have gone through it as well, but when the 4-lane comes through, it's pretty much going to wipe out downtown Chipley, were it to go right down Highway 77, obviously. So there are alternatives. Wausau's gone through that. At the end of the day, with Vernon and Wausau both, tearing everything down in the middle of town, I'm going to get castigated for saying this, but there was not a whole lot of loss anyway. And that 4-lane and the new business opportunities, certainly huge for that area. However, once again, those historic society people, it's an emotional issue. I get that. Nobody likes change. Nobody wants things to change, and they certainly don't want to hear change from somebody from outside the area. For 30 years, we were in Panama City Beach. 12 years ago, we moved up here, and all of a sudden, we were the new guy. We're fortunate. We represent some of the businesses and corporations within the city, and so we would like to see downtown area considered expanded. In other words, now downtown is pretty congested. It's just that very small area. There's not a lot of note there. There's a lot if you want to walk around, but there's not a lot of note because most people will park in Walmart a half a mile from the door and walk all the way down, but they don't want to park more than a few steps from a downtown business. And that mindset is pretty strange, So we work with West Point Home, we work with One South Bank, both of which are closer to the interstate. I'd like to see downtown considered that whole stretch. I think it would probably encourage businesses opening up along that. We've got a lot of old homes that have become businesses. The old Stone House is now an accountant's office.
Yeah.
Where do you go from here? I know, well, first of all, let's talk about these public meetings that you have set up. One of the reasons we wanted you on is because we understood that some of the initial ones were not well attended necessarily, and this is something everyone who drives through Chipley, let alone lives in Chipley or has a business in downtown, will eventually benefit from. When are you going to be meeting, and talk a little bit about how that's going to take place?
Sure. So we had a couple of public workshops, and the point of the workshops were kind of to be an open house, drop-in format where people could come in and learn about the project in general. So, all the different deliverables that we are doing as part of this project. So the steering committee meetings, we've developed some GIS maps to kind of just help visualize the area. The CRA did create sub-areas, so they identify places like the historic commercial core. So maybe some of those objectives and strategies are going to be a little unique to that commercial core as opposed to a low-density residential area. So kind of just prioritizing based upon geographical characteristics. And we want people to come in also to take surveys. We also did a survey, and what is on the survey are the strategies that the steering committee developed. So the steering committee developed these strategies for redevelopment, and we want the public to prioritize these strategies. So we're getting kind of that, not subject matter experts, but the people that live in the CRA, that a lot of business owners really. So we kind of got their strategies. Now we want the general public to prioritize them or even add new strategies if they want. And then after these public workshops are done, the big kind of, it's all kind of coming to head with the super committee meeting. The super committee meeting will be held on April 13th at 9 a.m. at the Panhandle Area Educational Consortium. And it's a committee that's going to be made up of the Washington County Commissioners, the Chipley City Council, and also the CRA Board. So this whole time, we've been dealing with the steering committee. So they're not the board. The board already has a pretty good knowledge and historical experience with working with the CRA, but we wanted some fresh, input. So. Sure. They will all come together on April 13th and look at these strategies that were identified and kind of give a priority to them as well. And a lot of things that were identified is just future coordination with the city and the county and the CRA, because no one can do it by themselves. And not necessarily funding, but just there could be opportunities where a project is coming up and the CRA and the city or the county, they can work together to kind of, whatever is their expertise that they can kind of contribute to. So that's the hope, and I think it's going to be a very fruitful meeting because we can just really lay some things on the table and develop a roadmap to move forward.
And on that April 13th, what time is the meeting?
9 a.m.
9 a.m.
Yeah, and it's just gonna go till, we're gonna develop an agenda and hopefully get through that agenda in a couple hours, but.
And that's at PAEC.
Correct.
Which is on West Street, just up the street from City Hall and the Ag Center and so forth. Mm-hmm. When we come back, we're going to talk to Caitlyn just a little bit more about West Florida Regional Planning Council. We're also going to talk about where do we go from here with that CRA. This is your opportunity to get involved. If you're a bellyacre, if you've been complaining about nothing ever gets done in downtown, now's a great opportunity to put your 2 cents in to find out, and working with West Florida Regional Planning Council, exactly what our goals, dreams, and aspirations are. And you have input into that, as well as finding out what maybe we can do, what's prudent, what's realistic, and where do we go from here. When we come back, we're going to do all that and more, and we will be right back.